Hi, I'm Amy Kay. This is my take about the Michigan proposed new rules requiring homeschoolers to register minimum, probably do other hoops and jumping through and strings and red tape and all of that. And the reason the Democrats say that they're proposing this new legislation coming out next year, this December, coming out in January later, is because they want to prevent child abuse. Because in the past, there have been, of course, there's people from all areas of society, sadly, wrongly, who abuse children. And so they think that because a homeschooling family over here abused their child, that means they have to regulate and watch all homeschoolers. And you know what? I call that profiling. And I'm going to make a case for why. It's profiling. It's straight up profiling. You can say, oh, it's to protect the children, but the ends do not justify the means, just like profiling. Now, typically we think of profiling as being racial profiling, and that is the traditional definition of it. And sadly, that's wrong too. Wrong. Profiling is wrong. But I'm going to make a case here that this is another kind of profiling and it's also wrong. So I went to the experts on profiling, and I'm pretty sure that's the ACLU. I went to their website and there is a plethora of articles. I do not agree with everything the ACLU stands for. Let's just make that clear. But I do agree with them. Discrimination and profiling are wrong and must be stopped. And I know they have done some good work to reach that end, and there's still much work to be done. But I found a 2009 report about the persistence of racial and ethnic profiling in the United States. That's the name of it. I will link to that publication below. I'm sure there's lots more information out there on this, but I pulled some quotes out of there. So here's their definition of racial profiling from the ACLU. They say that it is policies and practices that appear race neutral but disproportionately restrict the rights and freedoms of people of color. So again, they're focused on the racial profiling, but that means then that profiling restricts rights and freedoms. And so, the Dems are going to say, well, we're not restricting your freedom. You can still homeschool. We're just going to attach all these rules to it. Well, then you've restricted my freedom to homeschool how I want, in private if I want. If I want to remain private, I can do that. Just because someone else over here did something terrible, it doesn't mean that I am. Profiling. Much like racial profiling, might I add. And they go on, I'm just going to read just some quotes. New forms of racial profiling have affected a growing number of people of color in the United States, including also then Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities. We all know racial profiling is not just for African Americans. It's for other groups too. So, and then it goes on to say both Democratic and Republican administrators have acknowledged that racial profiling is unconstitutional. Everyone agrees, both Democrats and conservatives, racial profiling is unconstitutional. It's socially corrupting, and it's actually even counterproductive. It doesn't even fix the problem. Counterproductive, just like I said in the last video, making us register is not going to prevent the isolated cases of child abuse happening by homeschoolers. Same as racial profiling didn't, reduce crime or anything. Whatever absurd reason they were doing racial profiling in the first place, it was counterproductive. Another quote, the Obama administration has inherited a shameful legacy of racial profiling codified in official FBI guidelines and a notorious registration program that treats Arabs and Muslims as suspects and denies them the presumption of innocence and equal protection under the law. So if that's what racial profiling is, how is that different from what they're trying to do to us? If racial profiling involved a registration program, why is this registration program not considered profiling and considered, off limits by our government in Michigan? What's the difference? It's because I'm sure here they said, oh, it's just a registration program. We just want your information. But it was wrong. It was wrong. So this is also wrong. And it denied them the presumption of innocence. See, the whole thing with this is one isolated family over here did this. Maybe there's more than one family. There's not very many in the homeschool community, but even if there were a lot, even if there were a lot of child abusers in the home by homeschoolers, this would still be wrong. The registration process would still be wrong because it still would not fix the problem, and it is not fair to do that to the totally innocent homeschoolers, because you're making us suspects even though we haven't done anything wrong. Here's another quote from the publication, but this one they're quoting Senator Robert Menendez, and this came out in 2009, so you might not know these people. The legitimate desire to get control. Okay, so some of the racial profiling that was done in the past that the ACLU is criticizing in this publication had a legitimate desire to get control. Okay, so see, I'm trying to point out similarities between what the kind of profiling that the ACLU hates and this kind of profiling. I understand the Democrats who want this to go through have, and I agree with them, a legitimate desire to stop child abuse. They want control. Just like in this case, they had a legitimate desire to get control. I understand, and it is a legitimate desire to stop child abuse. Duh, we all hate child abuse. But this is not it. So let me read the rest of Senator's quote. The legitimate desire to get control over our borders, because that's what he's talking about at that time, has too often turned into a witch hunt against Hispanic Americans and other people of color. According to recent reports by the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and the Southern Poverty Law Center, inflammatory anti-immigrant rhetoric has led to a dramatic increase in hate crimes and racial profiling of Latinos. Counterproductive. They started, they had a legitimate desire, but it turned into a witch hunt, and then it just created more hate crimes. So, another quote from the publication. Since September 11th, our nation has engaged in a policy of institutionalized racial and ethnic profiling. If Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, he would tell us that we must not allow the horrific acts of terror our nation has endured to slowly and subversively destroy the foundation of our democracy. And that was U.S. Representative John Conyers quoting Dr. Martin Luther King. So again, let me point out the similarities there because it's important to notice them. So he says Dr. King would tell us we must not allow the horrific acts of terror that we endured to destroy democracy. Is that not just what's going on here? There were horrific acts of terror done to children over here and over there. And some are just suspected and alleged. They're not even proven. And they're even using those as reason to profile homeschoolers. But even Dr. King and U.S. Rep. John Conyers says that that will destroy the foundation of our democracy. When you use one horrific act over there to make a registration of everyone who has anything in common with that person over there who did a horrific act, you're going to destroy the foundation of our democracy. Okay, so I had to look this up. Do you know what, I don't know how to say it, NSEERS, NEARS, it probably has a way to say that. NEARS, it's an acronym, was dismantled in 2016. And that was like after 9/11, we went a little overboard. Some would say we went a lot overboard. And it was a database, okay? It was a database to prevent more terror acts. So it turned out, of course, it was wrong and counterproductive and unconstitutional, this database. So NEARS was dismantled in 2016 because, and again, this is all I'm quoting, because it finally agreed, everyone finally agreed it was awful. Okay, now I'm quoting. Created in the week of September 11th, the National Security Entry-Exit Registration, NEARS, targeted foreign nationals from 25 countries based on, not just the color of their skin, by the way, their religion, and their ethnicity, and their national origin. It was a discriminatory policy that ran counter to the fundamental American values, of fairness. It ran against the American values of fairness and equal protection. Furthermore, the system failed as a counterterrorism policy. Failed. And national security needs can be addressed more efficiently and effectively through other programs targeting individuals based on suspect behavior, rather through identity-based criteria such as race, religion, gender, or nationality. So they how many billions of dollars was spent on this system? And all it did was probably destroy a lot of lives of innocent people, created a lot of hype and hysteria, probably led to more hate crimes, as another person quoted. And it was discriminatory. It went against American values of fairness. And in the end, children's security needs to be addressed by through programs that target individuals. ACLU. All right, next quote from the ACLU. U.S. submission fails to examine the ongoing ramifications of the program for individuals and families affected by the registration process. So, you know, a lot of times when we think of profiling, we think of a cop, wee-oo, pulling someone over, putting handcuffs on someone with no cause. There was no reason to pull them over. They just look dangerous, you know. That's profiling. And we're like, well, no one's putting handcuffs on you, homeschoolers. We just want you to register. It's for your good. It's going to keep all the children safer. The ACLU says that registration, using a registration process, is a form of profiling, and it's illegal and wrong. ACLU. All right, and so you might say, well, Amy, all the things from the ACLU that you've read so far are about racial profiling. It's not really the same. I think it is much the same. It's not exactly the same. I totally grant you that. There are very different aspects that racism is from what we're talking about here. Racism is a different thing. It's a terrible thing, and it's wrong, and it's a sin. But what about this? Here's another quote. These new screening procedures singled out, so they're talking now about Sikh, I think it's a kind of Muslim who wears head coverings. Or I guess this could have happened in that time to anyone wearing different kinds of Middle Eastern looking head coverings. And so it's talking about how people who were wearing Middle Eastern looking head coverings were screened with higher scrutiny even though no evidence existed. And I'll skip some of the quote, and it said that they had to face additional screening procedures. It wasn't the color of their skin. TSA was unfairly screening people wearing something they did, not something that they are. So you could say, well, Amy, homeschooling is something that you do. It's not like your skin color. It's not your ethnicity. It doesn't like make you a protected class of minority. The head turban was something they did. It's not necessarily something for people of color. A lot of people nowadays have converted to Islam, and they wear head coverings too. So that was wrong. ACLU says that was wrong to discriminate just based on what people do if it's not illegal or suspicious at all. So at the end of that thing, there were like hundreds of points of recommendations. So they made all their evidence, they made their case, like this is wrong, this is wrong. And at the end, they has a recommendation. So I'm going to read one of those recommendations to the government/president. The president should issue an executive order prohibiting racial profiling by federal officers and banning law enforcement practices that disproportionately target people for investigation and enforcement based on race, ethnicity, national origin, sex, or religion. Again, religion is something you do. It's not something you necessarily are. It's not, because you can kind of control your religion. You can change religions. You can drop religion. You can choose a religion. You can't choose the color of your skin, and you can't choose your gender, and you can't choose what country you're from. So those protected classes are kind of different. And you might say, well, homeschooling is something you chose. Religion is a protected class, is what I'm getting at with this quote. And the ACLU has a lot to say about religion as a protected class. So if religion, something that people choose, is a protected class, why are they allowed to profile homeschoolers just because we choose to homeschool? It's not right. I hope I'm making my case. And you know who I'm really talking to here are not all Democrats. And I'm talking to anybody who thinks that this is okay. I want to convince you. I want to give you more information because you're smart people. And I think homeschooling is very misunderstood. And as soon as someone says, oh, we want to protect the children, like, yeah, let's do everything we can to protect the children. But that's what they said after 9/11 too. Let's do everything we can to protect America. and they went too far, and they profiled and they discriminated, and it was wrong. So I want to give you another way to look at this, especially you Democrats who are on the fence. Some Democrats have a conscience. I know you're out there, and I've seen Democrats flop or flip and change their mind about something to the right side. And I think that shows great wisdom and courage. So I'm speaking to you. I want you to see another way of looking at this, and to also remember, as you take in everything on this issue, you might say, well, I don't homeschool. This doesn't affect me. And that's in our nature. When something doesn't directly affect us, we don't care about the issue as much. You might have to homeschool someday. Or your grandchildren might need to be homeschooled one day. Things happen in families. Things happen with health. A child can get in a motor vehicle accident and come out with a CHI, a closed head injury. They're not the same anymore. And that parent might decide that homeschooling is best at that point. You want homeschooling protected. You don't want people profiling you or your wife or your daughter who's taking care of your grandchild to make them jump through hoops and have mandatory reporter inspections just because they homeschool and because sadly a horrific act happened over here. It doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't fix the problem. The ACLU says that over and over. It was counterproductive. So I'm going to end this video here, but I'm going to make another video about profiling in just a second, probably wearing the same clothes, so don't be alarmed. I just want to break these up into bite-sized chunks to make you think. All right, I'll see you in the next video.